All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. As you guys know, my name is Ginger. I'm the Executive Director of Connectionology Seminars of America. We are going to have a great webinar today. I can't wait for you to hear about all the things that you're going to be learning. And we have some wonderful speakers joining us. Plus, later on, you're going to meet some of our wonderful partners over at HMR, Fox AE, On Point Legal Nurse Consulting, as well as Strategic Relationships. And these are all incredible companies, so they're only going to add value to the work that you do back home. So you will meet them later on this webinar, and I'm hoping that you will ask lots of questions. We want you to try to put those in the Q&A box so we can kind of keep them all in one place today. And my dear friend Richard, he's coming in from HMR. He's going to be our moderator. He's going to help ask a lot of those questions for you. So don't be shy. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask away. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I want to introduce Richard for those of you guys who have not seen him on our webinars yet. He's actually been in the medical funding space for over 10 years now. He helps a lot of clients get the funding that they need for all of their medical care. And he's actually conveniently based in Sacramento. So he would be happy to discuss any personal injury cases with you, help you figure out different options for your injured client. And there's a couple of neat things I wanted to share about Richard as well. His interests and all of his hobbies include he loves animals, Mother Nature, great outdoors, deep conversations about emerging science, as well as anything from molecular biology to social psychology to astrophysics. And of course, he enjoys all the things that I love, which are fishing, hiking, hunting, sport, shootery, archery, as well as long walks on the beach. And who does not love long walks on the beach? So, Richard, we're excited to have you with us. I'm going to hand the webinar over to you, and you guys have a great time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ginger. Thank you for having us. And thank you, everyone, for joining everyone today and taking the time out of your busy schedules to educate yourself. Because first and foremost, education is key to help your clients achieve the justice they deserve. And I'd like to introduce Joshua and Isaiah Tate here. I've known these guys for quite some time. I originally met them at a CATLA conference, or was it TBI Med Legal? I think it was a CATLA, right? Yes. And we have definitely bonded over our love for neuroscience and traumatic brain injury. And I always advocate for these guys because what them and their dad does is an emerging technology that's really starting to help people heal from their brain injuries. It helps treat them. It gets them back on a quality of life for not just themselves, but for their family members as well. And I really admire gentlemen like these 2 and 3 guys, your dad as well, that their life passion is to help and serve other people. And I'd like to give you guys a little bit of a bio for these 2 gentlemen. After my bio, I'll give the mic to these 2 guys to give you this really fascinating and exhilarating conversation and presentation. Afterwards, we'll have a Q&A. So please, as Ginger said, put your questions in the Q&A box so that they can stay organized. It'll make it a little bit easier for me too. If there is a very pertinent question for a slide or whatnot, I will interject and ask that question. So, but don't worry, everyone will have their questions answered, and I expect a lot of people to be curious, and I can't wait to hear the curiosity. So Josh Tate is the president of Valhalla Health Partners. He's the founder and president and pioneer of a pioneering platform at the intersection of clinical excellence, legal strategy, and neurotechnology. With over 30 years of experience in the field of traumatic brain injury, including 5 years in a clinical setting, overseeing more than 50,000 treatments, Josh has positioned Valhalla as a national leader in objective TBI diagnosis and strategy litigation support. A second-generation expert in the brain injury and neurological recovery, Josh has consulted on thousands of injury cases, working along top attorneys, neurologists, and case managers to bring invisible injuries into the light. Under his leadership, Valhalla launched proprietary platforms like CogniTrack X and the Elevation Protocol, offering a dual-core system that blends medical objectivity with legal efficiency. Josh recently consulted on a $4.5 million settlement for a client with mild traumatic brain injury. Congratulations, man. Despite normal imaging, by leveraging objective diagnostics and expert positioning, he also helped secure a $2.9 million settlement in another mild TBI case involving symptoms traditionally viewed as insufficient for major compensation. When Josh is not architecting next generation solutions for injured clients and elite performers, Josh is a devoted husband and a father of two, driven by a simple belief: every person has greatness in them. Our job is to be clear. Our job is to clear the path for her to rise. Now, Isaiah Tate here, CEO of Valhalla Health and Human Performance. Isaiah is the CEO of Valhalla Health, leading advancements in brain recovery and human performance. With a master's degree in business creation, Isaiah focuses on building scalable real-world systems rather than theory. He has developed Valhalla's proprietary data-driven protocols that integrate photobiomodulation, neurocognitive diagnostics, metabolic testing, and performance training. These protocols deliver measurable results in concussion recovery, mood improvement, and peak athletic performance, and output. Under his leadership, Valhalla has delivered more than 50,000 personalized smart light cell therapy sessions, serving Olympic hopefuls, professional athletes, and individuals seeking to restore or elevate their performance. Isaiah's strength lies in building systems that work, scale, and last. Thanks to our wonderful partners from Strategic Relationships, Fox AE, On Point Legal Nursing Consulting, and of course, my company, HMR Servicing. We will be giving away 2 bags of delicious Costa Rican coffee after, and a coffee mug to one attendee. And good luck to all. And again, guys, I'm so excited for this presentation. I freaking love you guys so much. So thank you for being here. And I can't wait for everyone to learn what you do. So without further ado.
Hey, we really appreciate the intro. Richard's a great guy, and getting to know him and Ginger and, everyone at Connectionology has been such a fascinating time, and we have enjoyed it so much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let me see if I can do that so that that's working. Are you guys seeing that for me?
We're seeing your face. We're seeing the camo studio.
That's not what I need to do. Sorry about that. Let me go ahead.
No worries. I'm sure everyone is so eager to hear all these cool buzzwords. They're like, oh, what is all this?
I know. Try to get you with the buzzwords.
Those are really cool words. I can't wait to learn more, man.
Camo studio again.
Oh, we're seeing the presentation now.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so thank you everyone for showing up today. What we're talking about is winning an invisible war. What do we mean by that? Quite frankly, the biggest problem that we've seen historically over the last, 30, 40 years of concussion literature research, moving into litigation, and even some of the issues that the NFL and some professional, sports have seen, is that concussion is such a, how do you say it, an abstract concept for many. Normally in an injury case, something that you'll see most of the time is a fractured bone, a surgical, recording, some sort of image that allows you to do this. Now, DTI has allowed for us to show brain injury a bit better than we were in the past, but for many, it's still such an unseen injury that's so hard to quantify and quantitate for people, that this is where a lot of the difficulties that attorneys are having in winning these cases. And it's not because they're actually all that difficult to win. It's just because science has been lagging behind for so long. And what we've seen over the past 5 to 10 years is actually a paradigm shift in the way that scientists have been looking at concussion, and the new literature and research, which has enabled us to see a much clearer picture, which quite frankly should terrify defense attorneys and should excite any plaintiff attorney, because the literature is leaning much more on the side of a plaintiff attorney than it ever has in the past. So the first thing I'd like you to know is that this war is winnable. It's not, even if you're using milds, it's winnable in milds. We can, and have done some of the things that Richard just talked about, some of our recent ways that we've assisted attorneys in their victories have been with mild TBI. Both of those cases, in fact, and we wanted to highlight that because so often milds seem like something that doesn't really win cases, if that makes sense. Normally you're looking for a severe TBI, and that's when you start to, kind of contemplate dealing with concussion and TBI. However, milds have quite a good literature base, and we're going to get into that. So as we move forward, there's a couple things that you need to know. One, this is one of the statistics that is both chilling and clarifies much of our issues. 7 years after injury, 82% of milds are still symptomatic. That's something that every one of you should walk away from this knowing. Now, that comes from a study called TRACK-TBI. TRACK-TBI is one of the biggest studies that have ever been done following concussion and TBI injured patients from 24 hours after emergency room visit all the way now till they're at their 8th year, but they've published 7-year results. And this is how it works. So it's actually 56% of those are still showing the same symptom presentation they did 24 hours after the injury. And 26% of those have progressive worsening symptoms. So much so that the American Congress for Neuropsychology and Neurology has actually started to quantify TBI and concussion as a chronic evolving condition, which requires additional oversight, tracking, and treatment. Those are some words that are really good to hear because we've let this go on for far too long. Now, the hard part that you'll find as you start to do this is that most defense experts are almost 15 to 20 years behind. We did a machine learning tool where we started to quantify what sort of literature is being quoted by defense experts that we've worked against and, with when we work with the defense, because we do work for both sides, like any good expert should, quite frankly. And what we've come to find is that most are quoting from about 15 to 20 years old literature on average. Now, that's disconcerting because there was a big shift in the way that people viewed concussion about 15 years ago. Now, we can't do a whole show of hands, I guess, but I'm assuming everyone's seen the movie Concussion with Will Smith, or you watch football and are aware of some of the things that came out about 15 years ago. We started to see that there were big long-term effects for football players who had repeat head injuries. This was called CTE. But additionally, we're watching some additional risks for dementia, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's studies that have now come out from this. The NFL was a tipping point not only for public opinion, but additionally for literature and science, because the reality of research sometimes is acquiring funding to do projects is the reality of researchers. You can't just go and do research studies without incurring sometimes heavy costs. And so what NIH was willing to fund tends to be more towards very diagnostic criteria type research studies where we're like, hey, let's find the criteria for diagnoses, those types of things. But we're not really tracking outcomes of concussion or even treatments of concussion. And that's why to this day, there still is no FDA-approved concussion treatment for TBI. Everything is off-label. And it is done with medical supervision of doctors who understand that, for instance, for headaches, a doctor doesn't need the FDA to approve ibuprofen for concussion, right? The doctor knows how ibuprofen works and will use that to, in some cases, mitigate pain, right? And that's normal inside the medical space. But lately now, because of this, we've now just started to develop really interesting tools and techniques to identify early on, and additionally to overcome some of the barriers that you find inside of what you're doing. So one story that I think clearly helps kind of illustrate what your clients go through, and you've heard these stories, you've experienced this. We were talking to a man who frankly had his head in his hands, crying to us saying, why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? He was trying to do a neuropsych testing. And after really failing to grasp the testing, really to perform at the level that he thought was normal for him, that he figured he could do prior to the injury, when confronted with the reality of the fact that where he was is not the same place as where he was in that moment, he just broke down in tears. Now, about 3 or 4 weeks later, after a treatment protocol had finished with him, he was crying again, but for a different reason. It was because his symptoms and his neurocognitive performance had improved by 50%. That's the kind of things that we've seen here. And the reason that we're able to do that really comes down to the fact that Isaiah and I and our dad, who's not here today, Dr. Tate, have, because of him, grown up inside of this. When I say that I've been in this business for 30 years, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to be quite honest. I was probably 30 years ago. And so it's true. I promise it's true, but there's a caveat to it, right? Which is that when I was 3, I was in labs. Some of my earliest memories are in a lab for Dr. Aaron Bigler, who's a pretty well-known neuropsychologist. I was tracing brains when I was 6 or 7, helping with imaging there. I worked in my dad's lab growing up, summer jobs, those types of things. Isaiah was published by the time he was 13. We don't say that really to brag, because I don't think that paper is all that great of a paper, the one at 13, but we grew up around this. And Isaiah's laughing because I'm giving him some guff, but we grew up around these things. We grew up around TBI and concussion. We grew up around the limitations. We grew up around the strengths. And so when we started to do this, because we got a call one day that we had a treatment for concussion, that Dr. Tate had found something that he thought could work, it was pretty simple for us to jump into this feet first, right? Into the deep end. And it's gone places that we never thought before. Now we work with NFL teams and professional football teams, not only in helping to prevent and treat concussion, but because some of the things we do have some really great performance benefits. So it's kind of a strange life we live, where I'll get off a phone call with an attorney talking about a litigious case and then jump on a call with one of the head trainers at BYU here in Utah and talk about protocols for their athletes, which is a strange kind of synergy. And I think we find some kinship with Richard, who, when we were listening to his bio, all the cool things Richard's up to and doing. So what we're saying, though, is that there really is hope here. Hope not just for a person to help have some recovery inside of their injury, but hope that they're going to get the settlement that they really need. And that's fair and equitable inside of what we're doing. So let's talk about how to do that. So first off, when we talk about winning wars, right? We have a pretty strong history of winning somewhat unwinnable wars. The Revolutionary War is one of those, where from a historical perspective, there's no way we should have beat Britain. If we go back, 200 years to 1776, when the Declaration of Independence is written and signed, what has happened is a rebellion with the greatest superpower on the earth. So how on earth did we come out of that in less than 10 years, having beaten them and gained sovereignty? That's kind of a big deal. Well, there's some fascinating stories, and I ended up growing up on the East Coast for a time. And so we had gone and seen every single historical site. One of those is the North Church in Boston. Now, the British occupied Boston, and there were some issues there going on. And this story's pertinent, I promise, so hang in there with me, but it's also a pretty good story. Now, the British had started to get word about a place called Lexington and Concord, where we had militia who were amassing stores of guns. So the British will now move to Lexington and Concord, and we all heard this in what, 3rd grade, 2nd grade? 1 if by land, 2 if by sea. And I think everyone here has probably watched National Treasure, right? So what will happen is that they will send a signal saying the British are coming, and Paul Revere and several others will ride all the way out to Lexington and Concord in order to warn the people. Now, what does that have to do with this? Well, when you win wars, you need actionable intelligence, and you need it as early as possible. Because if you don't have it, ambushes, surprise attacks, flanking motions by the enemy, all of those types of things tend to lead to losses. In a litigious case or a litigation type setting, that's the same thing. I've sat with attorneys who have told me discoveries next week, and I don't know what to do at this point, and we need to fix this, and there's some problems, and I'm just figuring this out. And we're able to help because we're pretty good at what we do. But at the same time, I know the cases that win more because we keep track of our win rates, and we're pretty good. But I will tell you that the ones that win bigger, I think anyone will tell you this, any good attorney will tell you, are the ones that have the actionable intelligence as soon as humanly possible, as early inside of the workup as they can. So the truth is that probably 60 to 75% of your cases have a concussion element to it. That's just what we're seeing inside of the numbers. I would go into attorney firms and I would say, hey, how many concussions, TBIs are you seeing? And they'd tell me things like, I've seen 2 or 3 in my career. And I'm like, that's just not that's not possible. The literature is showing that it's not. Anything over like even at a 5-mile-per-hour crash, as long as there's some Q contra Q, you're getting a concussion. Now, I'm not saying that those people are going to remain symptomatic, but for the most part, your individuals are dealing with a concussion or a brain injury. To what extent is kind of the question there that allows you to evaluate if that's a good case or not, right? Because not all concussion cases are going to be these amazing cases. Sometimes you'll have about 25, 20, I think it's 28% that will start to get better. That's good. We like those cases, but those aren't the ones that you're going to do for concussion. That's great for those people. That's wonderful. But in those 82% where there's persistent symptoms, you're going to need to kind of evaluate what those symptoms are and if that's worth pursuing, or if those symptoms kind of fall under your normal pain, post-surgical or those types of issues that you need to deal with, because there is some overlap. Or in some cases, if they're having some PTSD, anxiety, depression type symptoms, the comorbidities of that need to be evaluated and then kind of parsed out. Now, there's some ways to do that that are really easy, but they weren't available a couple years ago. For instance, I watched some attorneys who would say that the way that they would choose whether a concussion was viable or not was whether they had a DTI positive image or not. So if this person would report symptoms, you have an attorney say, okay, we'll go get a DTI. Or heaven forbid, just an MRI, because that's even worse for, I think, reasons we all know. But just for the crowd and maybe anybody who doesn't, a DTI will be the preferred type of imaging sequence you want to run through an MRI because it is much more sensitive. And additionally, it usually comes with some sort of normative data, at least the good ones do. And so that's going to be important if you're looking for some structural proof. The problem is, however, that in many milds, DTI does not show differences. The same reason that like a CT scan is not going to show bleed. It's one of the reasons that ERs miss this when they come into the emergency room. But what we found as we did this was that there were some issues, right? So we'd come in and work with these firms. And our first problem is the ER. When your clients actually go to the ER, which I know is not always, but when they actually do, the CDC says that the number is about 50 to 60% of concussions are missed in the ER. There's a reason for that. ERs are trying to triage a person so they don't die right there and they can send them home. They're not trying to say, hey, you have a brain injury of a mild nature and we're going to now recommend some care. That's not really their job. It's not what they're doing. We all wish they would. It would make it a lot easier for the documentation, but they don't. And that's a sad fact of it. So that's one of our first issues. The second issue is this kind of theory of the gate of pain that you read about in psychology or medicine, is that often physical injuries are going to overshadow memory, mood, or concentration issues. And that's pretty normal. I mean, if you have a broken arm, the thing that you're not going to start complaining about is, oh, I keep forgetting things. You're going, my arm is hurting. Ow, 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 my arm. Please, dear God, fix my arm, right? That's a normal thing. And so you'll notice, and we've seen the numbers at this point, that a lot of times you'll watch a 6 to 7 months or 6 to 8 months out from an attorney getting a hold of a client. What they'll do within those 6 to 8 months is they're going to take care of the pain problems that someone's dealing with. And then all of a sudden, cognitive issues will pop up. Not because they just appeared, although that's what the defense might like to say sometimes, but because those are overshadowed more often than not by clients' main complaints. And so you have to kind of force the identification of this early, because clients don't necessarily know how to answer those types of questions or what to tell you. And some of that might be overshadowed. So there's ways to do that. And then the other problem here is that doctors and medical providers are specialists for the most part. We don't really send someone to just a general, pediatrician or something like that. And even if we did, they're really not very good at referring out to other specialists and creating pathways of care for these individuals. So for an attorney who comes in, you guys have all been, I wouldn't say victim, but you've all experienced this where you get a referral from a doctor, or they'll come out and give you a diagnosis and recommend absolutely zilch, nothing, nada. And you're like, well, what do I do with this? I have a diagnosis now, but I have nowhere to take this, right? So great, I diagnosed the TBI or concussion, but what do I do now? Who do I send this to? I don't have anybody in my network, or, the person in my network's 2 states over, or something like that. These are big issues that happen. Additionally, those people in terms of like orthopedists, chiropractors, surgeons, or pain specialists aren't brain injury specialists. And so they're not necessarily there to evaluate a brain injury. And so you have a blind spot that begins to develop inside of this thing. Now, the other reality is that we kind of put a lot of the burden on case managers here. That's what I see as I go to firms, and that makes sense. You have to. An attorney can't be doing everything that they, have to do without a case manager to help them most of the time. especially as you get more and more cases, as they become more intensive. Case managers are necessary to the process of building firms and building cases that win. But if even trained ER physicians, specialists, and others are missing TBIs, the fact that we're expecting case managers to do this is a losing battle, probably. I mean, that's one of the things is we can do questionnaires, we can do things. We've implemented questionnaires before. We tried to do that 3 or 4 years ago with many of the firms that we worked with here in Utah. And we still had a miss rate that was too big to really kind of think was good. It's just how it works. So what we ended up developing is what Richard talked about earlier, which is Cognitrack X. We thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could have an assessment that was meant to be used to screen, to get actionable intel to attorneys as soon as they onboard a client, that didn't depend on case managers, that didn't depend on the attorney, catching this and doing, a doctor's job, quite frankly, because the doctor should have caught it, but they're not, right? And being able to deploy that remotely to every single person at an affordable way, right? That was the challenge. Additionally, for us, I feel like is my video screwing up? You guys are getting it good? Okay.
You have a little bit of a lag on my end, but I'm not sure if other people are experiencing that.
Okay. If it's just a little bit, we'll be fine.
Yeah, you're fine.
So that was the challenge of what we decided to build. And the other thing that we wanted to do, because here was the value at the other end of the tunnel, was the data set. There is no data set inside of litigation that is just purely litigation. And so we created Cognitrack X and we began to do thousands of these screening assessments per month. And what that did was create the biggest data set in the world on litigation concussion. And whether you guys choose to use this tool or not, it's fine. There's going to be literature that's going to be published in the next 2 to 3 years that's going to be absolutely game-changing for you guys, because we have partners at Harvard and Stanford and several other groups that are now starting to publish on this type of thing. But what this does is allows us to discover concussions as soon as possible for your clients when they come into onboarding. So the way it works is it's really simple. There's about 4 or 5 things on a form that you fill out, or your case manager fills out when they do the onboard. Within 72 hours, depending on if your client will take the test or not, they will be assessed just the same way that a doctor would ask the questions for a diagnosis. And what that will do is it's going to identify TBI symptoms and tell you with high degrees of certainty the likelihoods of TBI, as well as care recommendations and pathways for you. And that has allowed us here in the spaces that we work in with our partners that have used it now to streamline their process and remove about 12 months of wasted time inside of concussion. It also fixes the problem of documentation late. We've started a documentation trail very early, and we're just now starting to get some wins with this, since, it takes, 2 to 3 years to go to trial most of the places. And it's allowed for us to now have very strong cases that have started early. So once again, actionable intelligence, that's the first step here, is you need to find some way to identify these things as early as you can possibly. Now, I think we talk about this over time, and I think I've mentioned it before, but late discovery tends to issues where I'll just sit with an attorney and go, quite frankly, if you're, 2 weeks into discovery, you don't have a diagnosis, you don't have forensic, you don't have any of those types of things, it's probably a little too late to invest in this case in the way that you need. Even if we do prove TBI, and that $2.9 million case was that proof, we did that, but not a lot of treatment was done. And so she was gated at the, kind of the damages that they could claim, because there wasn't a lot of treatment being done because it was so late in the game that they began to focus on the TBI. So that being said, it limits us in several ways that we can do things. Still winnable, still probably worth it in some cases, but not the wow factor that you're kind of looking for sometimes, and definitely not the potential that it could be. So I think that's still just gonna keep going. Told you about that already, the 15-minute. Oh, I guess we didn't tell you about the 24-hour turnaround. You'll have a report within your case manager's inbox within 24 hours of the person taking an assessment. We're really proud of that turnaround time. Talked about that already. Now it's $500 on a lien. That is that's the fantastic news here. We've been able to do this in such a way that this makes sense for most people to do, independent of what kind of policy limits or those types of things you're looking at. This is the first step. Now, there's a lot of other things, a lot of diagnosis, forensic expert, DTI, lots of other evaluations that can be done, which allow for this to happen. But your first step is always going to be your early warning system. If you don't have early warning, you're going to be in trouble. So we'll move into that. Now, from a bird's eye perspective, like a 50,000-foot view. Now, you have a TBI, and it is being recommended that you're going to move forward because it has enough symptoms to really be kind of worth it. Now, how do you start to build a case around that? That's the question. How do you start to anticipate some of the things that the defense is going to come at you with? And what does that look like? So what that looks like very clearly is that you're going to need to move to diagnosis. That's pretty easy to do, but in this case, you have two options. Most people will sometimes go, okay, well, I need to get a DTI. And that's the first thing that you do. However, neuropsychology is different and TBI is different a lot of times because you need functional outcomes. It doesn't matter that the image is showing, okay, let me caveat it for a second, so just hang in there with me. It doesn't matter that the image is showing a brain injury if there are no functional outcomes. We had a case here about 6 months ago that had positive DTI findings, but did not have great functional connection. It settled for $250. And that is $250. This should never have happened. We didn't work on this case. I heard about it afterwards from another attorney at the firm who was like kicking themselves because ultimately that can't happen the way that it does. But even if you have imaging but no functional outcomes, you're going to struggle to get this case to win and get it across the board. Now, if the worst thing happens that can happen and that image shows no positive findings, you're up a creek now without a paddle because you didn't do any functional sort of testing. Now, those are salvageable if you've done functional testing first. So that's why we recommend first get your diagnosis, do your functional testing, then go for the DTI, particularly because you can start to predict when a DTI will show mild based off of functional outcomes and kind of the severity that you're dealing with there. So that's very helpful for you inside of your cases. Now, the second thing that you want to do is, what is going on? Sorry, guys, I think my slides are out of order, so I'm just going to keep going until I find something. There we go. Okay. So your evaluations need to have particular things inside of them. You're going to want a good mix of physiological, objective findings, and also neurocognitive and neurobehavioral issues. So when we go into like an assessment with a person, you're going to want to have something along the lines of PTSD, anxiety, depression symptoms, and you're going to deal with that in particular ways, like for instance, the PCL5 or the CAPS or things like that, or things that you're going to use inside of those things to determine with some degree of accuracy and certainty in a way that's going to win in court. On the other side, you're going to have defense, and we'll talk about how this starts to interplay with each other as we go, but I kind of want to keep this a little bit more broad because if you get into litigation strategies, you can be very specific and it works for one way, but not necessarily every other way. But that being said, you'll start to have particular tests that are done for those. Neurocognitively, you're going to want to assess things like processing speed, visual domain, verbal memory, those types of things. But additionally, eye tracking and balance are some of the best ways to do this. Now, you'll hear about VNGs or iBox or those kinds of, products on the market, and those are great to use. But the point is that, for instance, if you have neurocognitive symptoms, that can be shown and backed by physiological symptoms that have to do with eye tracking or balance. So because those are physiological symptoms that show up and they're very objective and they're hard to quote unquote fake, and we'll talk about what we call malingering in a little bit. But if you do that, then you have really kind of shored up your foundations against attacks that are coming. You get a very broad view. Additionally, that allows for you to know about neurooptometrists and those types of things that you may need to be referring to as well. Now, on top of all that, you're going to have a DTI that can potentially happen, but it's more of the, the icing on the cake, not the cake itself. And so you need to understand that your DTI should add to what you already have inside of a functional setting. And additionally, what you'll want to know is that neurologists and neuropsych, there's a difference between the two. Neurologists have an MD, which is really nice a lot of times to get because a medical doctor is diagnosing for concussion and TBI. However, what they lack is the functional outcomes or the validity measures many of the times. The vast majority of neurologists are not going to do that because that's not their specialty. For instance, at the University of Utah, I think there's over 95 neurologists that work there at the medical school. And I don't think a single one has a specialty in TBI and concussion. And that's pretty standard across the country. It's not a normal route that most neurologists to go through. So if you have one that does that, great. But additionally, you're going to want to have those validity measures because that's going to be one of the big modes of contention inside of litigation or cross-examination is what is the validity of these types of outcomes? What does that look like? And then you're going to fight over it and all those types of things. And your experts are going to email back and forth and send their rebuttals. And there's ways to win that, but that can get into the weeds. So you want to make sure to have those things early on. So just to recap, your neurocognitive should measure things like attention, memory, processing speed. Results should be compared to age norms. That's just general practice at this point. You want to have normative data so that jurors can understand that this person is absolutely abnormal when compared to someone their age, gender, and those types of things. Additionally, you're going to have some sort of test of premorbid function. There's different ways to do that. The easiest is what's called the TOEF, which is a quick reading test that can estimate premorbid IQ. You want to make sure that they have that. If that's not happening, then you're going to have some issues because you might have an incredibly high performer, engineer, COO type person who, when he comes back and all of his testing is normal. And you go, well, he's only normal if he's, at 100 or a 90 IQ, not if he's at his 130 IQ, which he actually is at. So that's something that you want to make sure that you're testing against and you have good baselines. Now, if you don't have those types of things, school records, work product, right? Your character witnesses are from pre and post are going to be pretty important. I think Sagi down in Florida was talking last time we were at TLU and when Dr. Tate was able to present with him, which was really cool. But that was a big thing for him was his pre and post character witnesses. And that's a big thing for many of the cases that you're in. It's just good casework, right? Your eye tracking should have heat maps, which reveal subtle deficits, invisible in standard exams. We're so sensitive with some of this technology now that you can't fake this kind of stuff. And so these things really put hard and fast kind of standards and foundations for what you're trying to do inside of TBI and concussion. Now, your balance testing will talk about vestibular issues, the way that proprioception is working, maybe some of the issues that might have occurred when the brainstem gets shaken around because it's right there when that concussion occurs. And then obviously DTI and MRI, which I feel like most people are at least a little bit familiar with. So first we're gonna, as you do this, we're gonna talk about identifying, then you need to deploy pathways of care. You're gonna integrate your forensic, and you're gonna dismantle. So how do I want to do this? Okay. We're going to record. I think we're recording this, so I have to be fair and equitable here, right? That's the important part. But I'm going to say this quite frankly, in 98% of the cases that we've worked, whether it's defense or litigation, the defense are on the back foot. It is really difficult with the current literature to find ways to dismiss TBI or concussions. The recovery curves are not 3 months anymore. The recovery curves can look like anything from 6+ months to 2 years to 7 years. And those are all norms within the last 5 years by accredited institutions that you need to understand. So when you hear someone say, oh, they should have gotten better within 3 to 6 months, that's just not true. That's old data. That's completely, out of date. And those people need to go back and read some things. This is what CE credits are for. So we need to have and make sure that people are being current on their literature and research. Additionally, you will have attorneys who will do validity testing or their experts will do validity testing inside of this. Their validity testing will come back positive for pretty much everything except maybe one test, and they'll say that that invalidates everything. That is not how validity testing works. Quite frankly, validity testing is meant to be used to gauge the thing that it is testing. So there is some external validity testing that kind of measures all effort, But even that is meant to be taken with grains of salt and to be measured with the clinician's, understanding of that person. So for instance, things that will cause validity measures to fail are a client putting their hands in their head during a testing measure that is being timed because they are having a migraine or because their cognitive overload has occurred while we're testing them for 4 straight hours. I'm going to be honest, I don't have a concussion and I get tired and fatigued through neurocognitive testing, right? That is normal. That's not them faking it. That's not them malingering. That's not any of those types of things. More often than not, it's them just being kind of overwhelmed. And on top of that, they have additional cognitive fatigue from their injury. So if you leave these types of things inside your case, which the defense tends to do, these create key vulnerabilities that can be used. So what we really do a lot of times when we're on the defense is we just make sure that they do things right. And the idea of probably the best case scenario is that you either need to show that there's a comorbidity that is pre-existing. Bipolar is one of those things, pre-existing cases of anxiety, depression. That's where you're going to get kind of the harder arguments to beat. But recovery curves is not the way to win a case inside of defense, and that's very easy to do. And we can talk about, if you guys have some specific cases that you're working on, one of the best ways to use that Q&A session is going to be to talk about specifics, quite frankly, and we can go into how that works. So we'll send these slides out so you guys can have this. But when it comes to this, we talk about malingering. We have an acronym for it because you need to make sure that your experts aren't malingering either. There's a lot of times where you'll watch an expert who will write the exact same opinion over and over and over again. And when you put all their stuff into AI, you'll find that they're word-for-word copies, if not templatized, to be things. That's been a way that you can get some experts kicked out, right? That happens from time to time. So methodology used. Did they use peer-reviewed, medically validated ways to do this, or did they just make up something about, recovery curves not being the right amount of time, and so this person is faking it? That's not a peer-reviewed, validated way to determine whether someone has a TBI or not. So they need to use the validated ways to do this. Did they use their validity test? Did they use the right test? Did they, for instance, do a structured interview for PTSD? To diagnose or not diagnose PTSD, you have to do usually what's called a CAPS, is one of the standard interviews. It's about 50 pages of, I have to ask a very particular question. They need to answer. You write down the answer and they're scored off that answer. It's not easy. You can't just say, oh, he didn't do this. So if your guy on your other side, your expert, has not done the required testing, he can't make sometimes claims about what he's talking about or diagnostic criteria one way or the other. So recent literature, are your experts, 15 years out of date? Are they quoting McCree et al. From 2003 on football recovery curves, which, by the way, you can't compare college football athletes to a 50-year-old woman who got hit by a car. That's not a fair comparison. It doesn't work that way. But additionally, Track TBI's recent literature, which is written by McCree et al., so same author, says that 7 years is the recovery curve, or that they're still dealing with those symptoms 7 years later, like we talked about really early, which is a fun little thing to say. Well, this author can't have two opinions that are contradictory, so what's he saying? And the clear thing is that literature is population specific unless it's meant to be generalized in a population. And in order to do that, you have to actually do research on the general population. So he goes, college athletes are different than normal PI individuals. That is a pretty normal thing to say scientifically. So inconsistencies in logic, you guys can do that. I don't need to tell you how to do that, but no direct evidence. So sometimes they'll just say things and make aspersions, but there's no real claim to it. A lot of times we'll watch experts go in and they will say anything but make any sort of diagnostic claim. They'll say, oh, well, I can't make anything. I don't know about this. But at the end of their Rule 35 objective review, they have no objective opinion at all. That is really weak and pretty easy to overturn. You can't have someone who just says a whole lot of nothing while saying, oh, well, you can't tell for sure, this person's probably faking, or those types of things. So effort testing will get omitted. You'll watch people when they will perform the validity and they will actually pass all of it. They will actually omit those effort tests. They will admit that they passed them. You go, well, what did they score there? You can't just say that they're missing this. They won't talk about any sort of contrary evidence. They try and stay out of that. They won't make any sort of counterclaims or those types of things. That's a good thing to look for. Impairment contradictions are pretty easy. So if the individual was malingering with a pattern of cognitive deficits match real world functional loss. So like oftentimes they'll ignore things like trouble at work or professional improvement plans that have been in place, right? So no functional context is considered, and then they have a gain assumed without any sort of bias by themselves. So, which is the thing, is that malingering is based off of, it's really hard to actually diagnose, you guys, because you have to have like proof of intent. And you guys know that's really hard to do, is prove intent. So how do they validate that? They will almost never do that. And so that's a pretty big way to do this. So there's a lot of issues with the way that a lot of times defenses will build their cases. There's actually, I mean, sometimes plaintiffs can build their cases with these types of issues. You want to watch for these, you want to remove these as quickly as possible, and you want to be able to help to strengthen your cases. So I think, were we supposed to do a sponsor's introduction? I think we were. So
Yes, you read my mind, man. Gosh, you study the brain so much you can read minds. Yeah, we got a sponsor here. We got to introduce to all our lovely attendees. So, Ginger, without further ado, may you please introduce Ryan Green.
Absolutely. And Josh, is it okay that we close out your slides just for a moment?
Yes,
'Cause
absolutely. Go ahead and do that.
if I'm correct, I think Ryan is going to be coming in to share hopefully a very cool video with you guys. He works for this amazing company called Fox AE. You probably heard about it, or you probably met Cody. He's been traveling the country, and they work on some amazing graphics, demonstratives, medical illustrations. Literally one of the best companies in the country for this. Even John Romano just raves about what the work that they do. But Ryan has come in and he's going to share with you guys a little bit more specifics about the details. But Ryan, we are so excited to have you join us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Richard, nice to see your face. We talked the other day.
Yeah.
And Joshua and Isaiah, nice to meet you. I'm out here in Utah, actually. Live down in Vineyard. So, thanks, Ginger. I'm at Fox AE. We do animations and visuals for personal injury cases. We do a lot of TBI work. I was thinking about animations that I could show you guys that we've done for TBI. But I do have a physical model that a lot of our attorneys have been starting to use to show how fragile the brain is. We've got an attorney that will walk around the courtroom just holding this like it's super fragile, and go up to the jury and have them, look at him holding it like that. As well, we like to show how, in a concussion, the brain, if you could see this, is moving back and forth. It's hitting the front, it's hitting the back of your skull in coup contra coup. We have some animations that show that as well. The animation I wanted to show today is a DTI where it does show injury. And I've sped it up a little bit here. Can you see it?
Sure you go.
Okay. If you do have a DTI where it does show injury, we've done many animations of this, just to show exactly where those injuries are. But yeah, I was listening for a few minutes back, and some of the other imaging doesn't necessarily show the damage. But if you can show it, then it's going to be very beneficial in your case. This one shows those white matter areas. We can zoom in, we'll do cross sections, and show all the areas where there is that damage, and then we'll do a 3D model as well.
And then Ryan, can I jump in and tell them how that'd be useful to them real quick?
Yeah. Do you want me to back up?
Yeah, go back to the part where you're showing the deforestation. So those types of things are really useful for you because you can tie those to functional outcomes a lot of the time. So for instance, like prefrontal cortex up here on the left, where Ryan's now moving his mouse. Those types of things are going to be dealt with, this idea of like, you know, not being able to regulate themselves. So sometimes you'll have a client who has become way more, you know, combative than normal. That's going to be something that you'll point to inside of this, saying, hey, we know this is what this is for, those types of things, cerebellum in the back, and that you can tie those to functional outcomes that really are helpful for your case. And when you put them together, the jury really goes, oh, I get it, right? The judge goes, okay, that makes sense, right? And that's why illustrations like this are fantastic in use.
It's like the old classic tale of Phineas Gage.
Yep. Yeah, he didn't have to lose consciousness, by the way.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much, Ryan. We were just saying, I think you are the long lost brother of Josh and Isaiah. Because you guys,
Ryan, we should go to that sometime.
Yeah,
I know,
no.
because-
Richard was telling me that I should connect with you both, and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to give everyone a little, I got to give Fox A little bit of a shout out because I've worked with attorneys over 10 years, and I know other attorneys who have used services is a big selling point. And I will say that I've known Fox AE for a very long time. They do fantastic work. And you don't have to take my word for it, because I know our friends Joe Freed and Mark Lanier have used these guys, and they win. They win when they use them. So don't be shy.
And Ryan, please put your information in the chat box so everybody can stay in touch with you, okay?
Will do. Thank you.
Yeah. And Richard, since we have you and since you mentioned HMR, can you just tell everybody a little bit about what you do over there
Oh,
as well?
sure. Yeah. People are like, who is this guy? So yes, HMR Servicing, formerly known as HMR Funding. We are the nationwide premier funding source for lawyers and as well as medical clinics and doctors. So we started off over 13, 14 years ago doing medical funding. That was back in the era, Wild West days when doctors didn't hold lien or accept LOP. So we had to step in and help these people with brain injury and other catastrophic injuries get medical treatment because insurance just wouldn't recognize it, or a plaintiff couldn't afford their deductible. And then from there, we evolved into doing pre-settlement funding, which is for your plaintiff. It's an advance on their case, because a lot of times we know that plaintiffs don't have a car because it's total, or their injuries, they can't go to work, so they have bills to pay, and that could really ruin your case if your client is stressing about finances. And we have now from a couple years ago have started doing what we call case cost funding, which is essentially litigation funding for your cases, which is basically any cost associated with a case when you file suit and you have to get to trial, like Valhalla Health and Fox AE and Strategic and OnPoint. If you need some funds for these guys, we can help, because we all know that the defense counsel will come in with many experts and they think you don't have the money to compete, but now you do. And we do this. I mean, we have such a great reputation. This is why I work with these guys. And just let me know if you have any questions about any of these kind of cases. We operate in 40 states and we got people all over the place. So even if you just need a good name, a trustworthy advocate, just let me know.
Absolutely. And also, I was just going to mention, Richard, that I know Ted will be popping in later to do the special coffee giveaway. So you guys stay tuned and you might be the winner. So we'll see. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Joshua and Isaiah. And then Richard, please put your information in the chat box as well in case anybody wants to reach out to you. Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Let me pull up these slides again for you, and hopefully I can get it right this time. That work out? Okay.
Perfect.
One of the things, we're kind of moving to the practical side as we get towards the end, and I'm going to make this a little short so we can get into questions, because I think questions are where true learning really happens. So we wanted to talk about this $4.5 million case. I'm going to leave out details, those types of things, but this was an oil worker case. They worked on the oil fields here in Utah. He was on top of a container, in the pressurized container, when he lifted the lid, popped him off. He landed on the ground, had many concussion and orthopedic injuries, right? But the defense big thing is pre-existing conditions. I wanted to highlight this because one of the ways is a lot of times you're going to miss some of this stuff, and you're going to get a case that maybe, you got referred to you from somebody, and your job's going to be to fix this because it wasn't done the way that you would have liked it to be done, and those types of things. We talk about how that happens. So the big claim of the defense at the end was, the fact that he had a pre-existing diagnosis of bipolar disorder. I mentioned that earlier. Bipolar is one of the really hard ones, if you get it. And so this was a really big win for us because we weren't able to do any sort of our testings at all. This was just review of the records of the expert opinions for the neuropsychs that had done the testing. So once again, the way that this works is you're going to have to go in and see that these neuropsychs, did they do what they're supposed to do? Did they not? All these types of things. And then look at his medical history. So the big real reason at the end that he wins came down to 3 points. One was that he had significantly and substantially kept his condition under control. The real story was that his wife left him about 25 years ago while he was in the military, and that was his quote unquote bipolar episode. It was in the early 90s. Not sure if that really is bipolar or just him being really pissed off. But regardless, you don't have 20 years of this man not having any issues just to suddenly show up at the point of injury. Hasn't been to the doctor in 10 years and suddenly is going to the doctor every other week, right? For pain and those types of things. That kind of difference is really important, whether he has a pre-existing condition or not. Whether it's anxiety, depression, whatever you want to call it, whether it's pre-existing concussions, you don't get a person that's having minimum complaints going to having lots and lots of complaints without saying that that injury hurt him. The additional thing about concussion is that things like pre-existing conditions actually make them a more vulnerable population. And so a lot of times the argument just gets very flipped. Okay, sure, he has a bipolar disorder. And that's what we ended up doing inside of cross-examinations was, well, isn't this true? Then that would make him more vulnerable to a concussion and a brain injury. Wouldn't that be more of an issue for him? And the truth is that, yeah, it is, right? And so those were standard questions that you can ask that really kind of change this around. The second thing was that their main neuropsych witness completely omitted some of the testing that he should have done. And when asked this in cross-examination, it wasn't very good. He ended up getting tossed out of the court that day. So that's another thing that you can see, like you can't have someone diagnosing PTSD or not diagnosing PTSD without doing a structured interview. It's not supposed to happen. It's not how we do things. That's a license issue. And his license now is, at stake because of that. So doing that, we were able to really kind of reverse these narratives that were had, and we went from a $250,000 offer to 4.5 million. That's a pretty substantial change. Now, we probably could have gotten more if we were able to get to treatment and do some of those things earlier for this guy, right? With cases like these, it's really important that you invest in those cases. HMR is a fantastic partner for us because it allows you guys to invest in cases that you normally wouldn't be able to touch, right? It's true that a lot of times when on the defense side, they have a lot of money to throw around and they're able to do kind of what they need to do. And they're not super worried about getting the things that they need to get, right? Plaintiff attorneys are the tip of the spear here, and they need kind of the ways to, allow David to fight Goliath. You know what I mean? And so HMR works on that, and we are so happy to work with them and couldn't recommend them more. But in a case like this, HMR would have been great if we could have got them involved earlier to allow for this guy to get additional treatment, evaluation, those types of things, which would have elevated this case even farther. That being said, we talk about, I'm just going to kind of sum up these types of things of what we would have done, right? Earlier, we would have done a comprehensive objective testing suite, right? We were able to do the strategic expert rebuttal, which is us reviewing these types of things and then generating reports that come with cross-examination questions and all the wonderful things that, make you guys look really good in a courtroom, because quite frankly, you are the tip of the spear and we play a support role inside of this. This is where we have our dual core system that we talk about, which is medical objectivity is dealt with by our docs. They are siloed inside of that basically mandate to work that way. They don't see the other sides of the cases. They don't see the policy limits. They don't see those types of things. And then there's the side that I'm primarily in charge of and responsible for, which is your strategic case elevation, which is all about understanding how exactly to put this together to make this work, what the other experts are saying, what the gaps in your arguments and your experts' arguments are, and what the gaps are in the defense. So how to shore up yours, and how to take advantage of theirs. Once again, intelligence is the way of the game, right? And that's how you win wars. And then at the end, we were able to establish clear timelines that were able to refute the defense's claims that this was a clear established pre-existing condition and allow for those types of things to win. Some of the things that we would have liked to have done with treatment, like we talked about, and we're going to talk about that for a second. It was an 18 times increase. Woo, we did it. It felt really nice. When it comes to treatment, our treatment is a little different than anything else out there. Richard talked about this at the beginning, that we're doing things that, other people don't even know about at this point. Well, this is what we do. One of the things that we are using is called photobiomodulation. We are using light to modulate cellular function. So when it comes to a brain injury, we know 3 things that happen physiologically in every single brain injury ever. Now, how that plays out functionally is always going to be different. But from a biological standpoint, especially as you go cell deep, we know what's happening. 1, you have a chronic inflammation response. So your cells have an autoimmune function. There's a couple of them. 1 is up to build up inflammation, to block hemorrhages or those types of things. And the other is to actually break those down. So one of the things that particular wavelengths of light can do is actually modulate the phenotype of immune cells to start to break down that chronic inflammation. So things like brain fog, cognitive fatigue, memory issues, some of those things will begin to resolve, particularly brain fog will begin to resolve very, very quickly when dealt inside of these types of protocols. The second is going to be your circulatory issues. Now, I'm not just talking blood flow, right? Our blood is one of our circulatory systems, but it's not the only one. Particularly with the brain, Ryan showed you that wonderful container with the brain inside of it. The brain actually sits in a vat of liquid called CSF fluid. So that's why there's space in there, because it's actually floating. It's one of the ways that it takes the pressure off the brainstem. But what that means is that that brain will move inside of your head, right? And so when an accident happens and your head goes kind of like this, well, what your brain does inside of that container is start to get shook around and start to impact the insides of the head, right? And so that's where you get a lot of your injuries that we talk about, like axonal shearing, those types of things, has to do with compressive force and decompressive force and different tissue types and, coup contra coup motion of, hitting that in the wrong thing. And also the inside of your skull isn't smooth, right? But what happens in the brain is that we really care about that CSF fluid. It can actually flush through the brain like a sponge. And that actually removes a lot of the toxins and the waste products. And so what happens when a brain injury happens and you have a circulatory issue, your lymphatic system will stop flushing the way that it needs to, particularly during sleep or throughout the day. So you start to have a buildup of these beta amyloid plaques and other sorts of byproducts of cognitive function. And that leads to cognitive issues. And as that starts to build up, it starts to build up and build up. Just think about it about, hey, what would happen if, the garbage men or waste management went on strike? And they went on strike for a couple of years. I mean, what's that going to look like? Where's the trash going to go? Our society would change very drastically if that shut down. And that's what happens in the body. But with the intervention of using particular wavelengths of light, once again, we watch that system start to flush almost immediately. And that changes things for people. So additionally, the last thing, which is probably the most powerful, and this is probably where you're going to get to the biggest sort of discoveries that will come in the next 50 years inside of medicine will come here, is how light is interacting with mitochondria in the cell. Now, for all of us who have taken 8th grade biology, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. You know that, right? Your cells run on energy. That energy is produced by your mitochondria. But when a concussion happens, mitochondria become able to produce at only 1/9 the efficiency. So that's an issue from a cognitive perspective, because when you're lacking resources like that, all of a sudden your brain is going to make decisions on what it should do, what it's going to preserve, what it's not going to do at cellular settings. Now, from a systemic standpoint, that leads to breakdowns. Now, when you reverse that, which once again, particular wavelengths of light can do this, you see big changes. Now, what this looks like from a functional standpoint is in about 2 weeks, we can see a 50% reduction in anxiety. We can see reductions in PTSD, depression symptoms. Suicidal ideation will disappear without pharmacological intervention in about a month. You'll watch 2 standard deviation improvement in cognitive performance across the board. Now, this doesn't mean that they're better or that they are completely healed or recovered. What it means is that there's an intervention that can help them to live their life closer to the way that they lived before. And it's necessary for these people because they truly are injured. The great thing about this treatment is that we have built this from a research and an analytical perspective. Every part of the results of this are tracked from pre-treatment baselines to post-treatment baselines. Every part through is tracked by neurocognitive testing, the same ones that the defense will use, because we thought that it would be nice to just be able to prove that it worked. So it's kind of fun being a doctor that can, show a patient and show an attorney, hey, by the way, this is the results we got him at the end. And this is how this works, and this is how much you're doing. That kind of data allows us to really be strategic in how we recommend things, but additionally strategic in how we build cases. So those types of things are fascinating. We'll send some stuff on the line if you guys want some more information on it. But our tier system is where we're allowed to do this. We can make this work, and we have options that work within different tiers, from small policy limits to options where you have additional, financial resources that can be available inside of cases. We understand that. And we're grateful to have HMR once again, because they allow us to work with you guys in really big ways. So with that being said, really the idea here, if you could take away 3 things, is that you need actionable intelligence. That will be the biggest way that you win cases, is just getting it as quickly as possible. 2, you're going to need a care pathway and pathways of care within your networks, which we can help with. And 3, that's where your expert guidance comes in, your forensic depot, cross-examination, prep, those types of things. So that being said, it's time to make the invisible visible, and it's time to win the war. So I think we can do questions at this point, unless we want to do do we want to do the raffle before or after? Ginger?
We can always do it a little bit after. I'd say let's take a couple questions.
Okay, perfect. I'll close the slides out, and yeah, let's have some questions from you guys.
All right. So first question is by Joji. She is asking, what if the medical records say that the headache should go away within 3 to 6 months?
A headache going away within 3 to 6 months? Can I have some context for that? Is there more context to that?
I don't have context, but unless Joji does message in, but I'm
If she
assuming
doesn't,
what
I'll start talking, and if she does, then we'll do that. So
yeah,
say if you don't have a diagnosis of concussion, you should definitely go get one at that point. If symptoms are that bad, that's a brain injury, and that needs to be addressed. And you already have a medical record that's allowing you to go after that and address that in a big way, right? So you go, hey, look, if there's a headache that bad for 3 to 8 months, then chances are there's a brain injury there. That's just a no-brainer, right? And so go in and do that and try and find a diagnostic. More than happy to answer any questions about that personally if you want to just reach out to me. But I would say that you need to go and start looking at the other symptom presentation as well inside of that case. What kind of emotional dysregulation, what kind of mood she's dealing with, cognitive fatigue. Chances are, if it's that bad, I think in about 95% of the cases where we've had something like that be an issue, she should be seen very quickly, because that's more likely moderate than not. And there's ways to intervene in that to take care of those headaches for her, but she has some other issues that need to be addressed and identified. So that would be my recommendation there.
wonderful. Thank you for that response. We have Michael Brown is wondering, what about a case that's 2 or 3 years old with TBI never treated?
It depends. In some ways, you can make a really great argument that, like, hey, we were making sure that the symptoms weren't going to go away since we're looking at the recovery curves. You can play the defenses game there, which we've done successfully many times before. So we're not really worried about treatment starting. You can fix a case like that. There might be some particular things that might make me say no in some cases, depending on, like, if he is consistent in symptom reporting, then that is really good. If you're just catching symptoms now, it's probably salvageable, but I'd have to take a look in person and kind of look at that and see what that looks like. But there's no reason that it wouldn't happen, and we haven't been able to do it successfully before.
Awesome. Okay, so Sean Simpson, Zana, and Daryl Young are asking if your services are available in Southern California, LA area, or the Bay Area, Northern California.
Yes. That is, yeah. So,
Okay. I like those easy ones, right?
yeah, I'm just, I don't know. You can just contact us and we'd love to work with you. Yes.
Absolutely. Okay. And Beth Lee has a case right now where a client has fallen 3 times since his accident on 6/29 of, sorry, my notepad just cut off. 6/29 of 25. And she's wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, so if he's fallen 3 times, he's never fallen like that before. That's going to talk to some very high fall risk issues with vestibular systems.
Yeah.
You're gonna wanna
She's saying he has a level 4 concussion as well.
Okay. So there's different ways of criterion level 4 concussion. So I'm not exactly sure what that is, but it's clear that he has a diagnosis of one with his vestibular issues. I would say that the biggest thing for you, if you haven't already, is really get a good wide range of what his symptoms are and his functional issues are. And then you create a treatment plan from that, right? And more than happy to talk in particulars about that kind of case. But I think Isaiah added some things too. Isaiah lost his voice, so usually he will talk, but yeah.
All right. Does anyone else have any other questions? I don't see any other questions, my guys.
That's too bad. I was hoping for a hard one, hopefully.
Well, don't worry because there's still time for somebody to think of that, okay?
Here we go.
We're gonna take one more quick break real fast because I've got Sam coming in with Strategic and you guys, a great company. You know, I always get so excited when Sam comes in because this is a great company that's doing things where they're helping find ex-employees. And he's got these EEL reports, ex-employee reports he's going to tell you about in just a moment. But Sam, it is awesome to have you with us today. I guess you're in Atlanta, is that right?
Yes, from Atlanta.
Great. I know that you and your dad, Paul, are usually traveling across the country. So it's good to see that you are home for a little bit. But
Yep.
we're excited to have you with us today.
Thanks, Ginger. Always a good day to be in Connectionology and see Ginger and see my guy Rich. Hopefully I'll see you soon, Rich. And of course Ted, the man Ted. Hey guys, Strategic Relationship is our company. What we do is we are, you might have heard of us as the ex-employee guys, the ex-employee experts, I don't know, probably many monikers. Really what we do is we work on cases, high value cases with finding former employees who could come in and talk about conditions within the company, whether that be high level corporate wrongdoing issues, possible areas of negligence and wrongdoing, and then really honestly policies and procedures, hiring practices, those kind of things, learning more about the company and what the kind of inner workings of what's going on. So how we do that really is I get calls every day and they go something like this. Hey, Sam, I'm suing this company. I believe people who held X, Y, and Z job titles from the years 2015 to 2018 are going to hold some relevant knowledge for my case, whether that be those high level issues, those policies and procedures, those hiring practices, you name it, whatever your theory is. And what we do with that information is we find a list of former employees that meet those parameters. We get you their names, their job titles, their tenures, and their active confirmed phone numbers. And that's really step one in our process. Always is going to be the research to find these folks. And then step two is going to be to really funnel or distill that list down into the primetime folks who have the specific knowledge. So what that really entails is finding the folks and then interviewing them based off of what you're looking to learn, and then connecting you with the good leads. So we work on all kinds of cases. We do trucking cases. We do nursing home and negligence. We do your normal slip and falls and trip and falls, your premises liability, really anything that involves a corporate entity where we could get involved with and find people who could talk about the company. So if you have any case, there's not really any case that's too small or too big for us. We can get involved with and find former employees who could hold knowledge that could be really game changing for your case. And yeah, I'll put my stuff in the chat. Feel free to call me anytime. I just met with somebody who was on a webinar last week or 2 weeks ago, who's actually here in Marietta with me. I didn't know. And we just got coffee. So feel free to call me if you're in Atlanta. I'm down to meet up. But also willing to just hop on a call or meet you at a conference too.
Hey, Sam, FYI, Travis Alexander is asking you to reach out to him because he has some stuff to discuss with you.
Oh, great. My guy, Travis.
And that makes me so happy to hear. I love when you guys are connecting with each other, helping each other. So that just made my day, Sam. Thank you for
Sure.
sharing that.
For sure.
All right. And then be sure to put your information in the chat box so everybody can stay in touch. Hopefully they already have you in their phone, but if not, you would be somebody on speed dial for sure. Thanks again for being with us, and we're going to see you back here on the next webinar. And guys, you're right. These good questions, they are coming in. Ted, though, should we do the coffee giveaway real quick and then we'll jump to the questions? Oh, you're on mute.
Come on.
There we go. Sorry about that.
I just think we should just go ahead and do it because I'm really excited and I want to know who the winner is.
Yes.
So we have been working with you, Ted, now for years. You've been on almost every single webinar with me, minus like one or two or so. I let you off the hook. But you've been spreading joy and giving away this coffee to all of these great attorneys and paralegals across the country. And so we're excited to have you with us today. Who is our grand winner of the coffee giveaway and the special mug giveaway by HMR?
Yeah, I'm always happy to give out caffeine. I feel like everybody needs it, so I love sharing. I'm excited to announce it's Daryl Young this week, and he's out of Pleasanton, California. So congratulations.
Wow, congratulations, Daryl. Well, both you and I, we can reach out to him after this webinar and make sure he gets his great coffee. And again, there's more chances to win on our next webinar if you didn't win today. But thank you so much, Ted, for all that you do. I know we're going to see you and your team in Fort Worth, Texas, in the stockyards. We're going to cowboy country, you guys, and we're going to be learning all about depositions. And that is November 6th through the 8th. All I can tell you is go to our website, look at the agenda. It's amazing. Great speakers. We're going to have a lot of fun. You're going to have a lot of good education, and it's all going to be in a smaller environment. It's coming very close to being sold out right now. So I actually need to go check the attendance so I don't go over. But please try to get in now if you want to go. And then our room block is about to sell out too. So you want to get in while you can because the Texas Country Music Awards is happening that weekend. And that's another reason why you need to go get your room. So thanks for supporting and coming to all of our live seminars, but more specifically for being a part of these webinars. And thanks for sharing them with all of your colleagues and your coworkers. As I've told you guys before, it is the best compliment you could ever give us, is just to share it with a friend. But Ted, you're amazing. We're going to see you back here again soon. Thank you for all that you do, okay?
Yeah, thank you. And it was great webinar. So thanks, Joshua and Isaiah. It was just fantastic to watch.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Seeing you.
All right, Richard, I'm going to leave it back to you because I see these good questions coming in.
Yeah. Okay. So Zana has another question. She says she has a client where the last doctor she saw is a neuropsych after a neurologist, and she has a diagnosed concussion. She has ongoing problems like fatigue, anxiety, etc. Who else should she see as far as a professional doctor or professional expert?
Well, I mean, she'd want to probably see us. I mean, frankly, you're going to want a treatment plan at this point. That's usually where you're going to start to look at interventions and what those look like for your case and those types of things. So in that case, I would say you're going to want to look at treatment. So normally what that looks like is you're going to have some sort of protocol on a, 2 to 6 week type of basis where those types of things will occur. But we can talk afterwards. I think you are in SoCal, so we're totally down to do that. So.
All right. And it looks like Angela had a question as well, but I think Isaiah answered that. And if you need more information, just please go ahead and contact Joshua and Isaiah after they give everyone their contact information.
I don't know if those answers actually get posted to everyone. I think that just goes to them and to the host and panelists.
Oh, I see. You did. Okay. I thought that went to everybody. Okay. So you may just read off. We may just read these off. Okay. I got you. Okay, so Angela, according to your question, she asked if any DSM-V, MH disorders, DX present on diagnostics brain imaging. Examples are bipolar, borderline disorder, borderline, etc. And the response is really depends on the current symptoms being reported. The right next step can vary case by case. Please feel free to reach out to Valhalla Health directly about your client. They're happy to review and point you towards the most appropriate option. DSM-V diagnosis, like bipolar or borderline, don't show up directly on standard brain imaging. Research sometimes finds correlations in brain structures or function, but imaging alone can't diagnose those conditions. They're identified clinically, whereas concussion TBI can show objective changes that help explain overlapping symptoms.
So you're going to want some sort of functional testing to go and find those types of diagnoses. You can't necessarily get that from an image, right? So, and if you want to get that from an image, you need to find an expert who's really good in the research. So his CV needs to include a lot of good research inside of this where he can speak to that. If that's someone that you have, then that can work there. But for the most part, you're going to want some sort of functional type of diagnostic testing.
Wonderful, thank you. Carolina is asking, could the onset of addictive behaviors after the accident be causally related to traumatic brain injury sustained in that accident?
Yeah, there's a huge literature for that. Alcoholism, those types of things. When the brain injury, like we talked about the prefrontal cortex earlier, that is the place that says no. That is the place that says, hey, so, you know, someone has, for instance, different clients, oh man, there's lots of different ways to do this. Porn addictions will increase. They've shown that alcohol addiction, drug use, their ability to mitigate their own actions is going to be damaged by that prefrontal cortex. So it's not abnormal for someone to become an alcoholic after a brain injury. It's documented. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay, and your brother responded with a little bit more information. He says research supports that addictive behaviors can emerge or worsen after a traumatic brain injury. Injury to brain regions involving in impulse control, reward, and emotional regulation increases the vulnerability to substance use or other compulsive behaviors. The key for legal purposes is the documenting that changes in behavior relative to the timing of the injury.
Yeah, so if he's not an alcoholic before and he is afterwards, or his consumption is documented by spouse or partner or some sort of, you know, personal witness, or by work or those types of things, that's going to be the thing that makes that really easy to do.
Okay, great. I think, does anyone else have any? Oh, okay, so Angela's asking, she says she has a colleague that has a case where defense is saying the imaging results are showing pre-diagnosed bipolar, not brain injury.
Angela, I'd love to see that expert opinion, quite frankly, because that either that person is the genius of geniuses, that is who I'm talking about when it comes to research, or that person is completely wrong and is about to absolutely get their opinion wrecked if someone could call them on the carpet for it.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah, I wouldn't see that happening. Yeah.
That's the best feelings when he can funk those guys out.
Yeah, you're just like, hey, like this defense experts will overreach so often in an effort to really try and like get the attorney what they want. And that happens a lot. And so that ruins attorney's case. This doesn't help the defense, especially when you have someone on the other side who just can call bull. And
Yeah.
that would be me. I would call bull right now on that, going, I'm not sure how they're doing that. And imaging, I'm not sure how imaging is going to show pre-diagnosed bipolar and not TBI. That just sounds like the normal pre-existing condition. It's not a TBI. It's not a TBI. It's not a TBI. So
Alien technology, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Well, very good, man. I appreciate the response. Yeah, HMR has done over 11,000 litigation cases, so we have definitely seen our fair share of experts just getting punked. They'll say anything, and like you said, they overreach so much. So it's all about having the appropriate experts to fire back, and like Valhalla Health, right?
it's one of our, that's what we do for fun during the day.
That's just like the cherry on top. Like we help people and also embarrass the defense's experts. Very good. Ginger, it looks like we have about like about 5 minutes left.
Yep, absolutely. And I looks like all of the questions have been answered so far. After this webinar, I'm going to be emailing you guys the contact information for Joshua and Isaiah so you can stay in touch with them, as well as Richard and all of our amazing partners that we work with. So just definitely reach out to them. And then if you'd like a copy of the slides that you saw today, I believe you could just email Joshua and he'd be happy to send you a copy.
Sounds good.
But I can't thank everybody enough for being here with us and for watching the webinar today. Do you guys have any last minute comments before we head out?
Oh, looks like we have an open question.
Got one more?
John Roberts
I want
just,
to know if we can work in Massachusetts, and the
Yes.
question, yeah, we can do some work in Massachusetts. When it comes to treatment, right, this is going to be the thing. Not great treatments on every corner, and quite frankly, when it comes to remote treatment, there's some difficulties in there, but there's ways to work inside of cases that make that work. So happy to talk to you.
Awesome. And I hope you guys will come back and speak again because this was a lot of fun and I'm actually sad it's over. I was like,
well,
it's
that-
always good when you're learning such good information. So I'm speaking on behalf of everybody. We really appreciate your time today.
absolutely. Thank you for having us.
it's great having you guys. And thank you everyone for joining.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will see you guys all later. Richard, I know I'm going to see you on the road somewhere. And thank you for all that you do. Okay.
Thank you. Everyone have a beautiful day. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.